Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Welcome to tonight's chat, brought to you by the Screen Music and Sound Guild and the Director and Editor Guild of Aotearoa New Zealand. This is a real pleasure to be here for me, and I'm very honoured, and it's my absolute pleasure to be here with our guests, Dave Whitehead and Michelle Child. They are two of our best, and I know you were born in Australia, Michelle, but we'll claim you as our own wholeheartedly.
Regular parlour.
So welcome. There's an immense amount of knowledge, a wealth of experience between these two artisans here that we're going to sort of touch on a little bit. I won't go through the list of their combined CVs. I encourage you to go check out whitenoise.co.nz if you want to have a look and learn a little bit more. But they've worked on every kind of production in terms of no budget to multi-million budget. And I'm very keen to hear their insights and sort of get a better understanding and appreciation for this unsung author role, which is sound design. And it's a very timely conversation to be had. There's going to be time for audience questions. If at the end we'll have half an hour, so you'll be able to put those in the chat box and send them through directly to Claire, who will be moderating them with us. But welcome, Dave and Michelle. I thought a question to ask and open things up would be around not so much about what is it that you do, but more around the why. Why do you do what you do? And after 30 years of experience, why are you still finding nourishment in this role?
Mostly money.
Lies.
No, yeah. I feel like people don't necessarily choose sound, it chooses them.
That's kind of true in a way.
It's like a calling.
Well, yeah, like, I mean, you're a musician.
Most of us are musicians to start with. And
I was a musician. I was sort of composing for theatre and sort of fell into composing for some short films for some friends of mine. And then those got noticed by people doing feature films. So it was actually, I really thought I was a composer. I'd wake up in the morning and believe I was a composer. And then at some stage, I realized that I was good at doing sound effects and that I actually really enjoyed the process of creating sound effects. I still like composing too, but
yeah, I'm the same. I started out doing music, and eventually my compositions became weirder and weirder until they were just kind of abstract soundscapes. And I decided maybe I should get into sound design. And I also really like how passive it is compared to composition, which I also still like. But it's a more subtle dark art.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely go down your own rabbit holes, and I think that voyage of discovery is what still keeps me there. It is because you get a script and you start reading things into that, and you read the script notes, sound notes in there in particular, and just sort of you feel your way through the script, and I make notes, and then you see the picture and some things change, some things stayed the same, but a lot of your grounded thoughts, often your first intuitive thoughts still stick, and they're the ones that sort of will end up making it to the end most of the time.
And I also liken it to painting, which is probably what I wanted to do most when I was a kid, is just be an artist. And it's like painting with invisible color.
Great.
Create the paints.
Yeah.
Excuse me, my daughter's just popped in for a second. You can join us. This is Sylvie.
Hi,
That's great. This is Dave and Michelle and a whole bunch of other people. I'm interested to, your thoughts. I mean, you were talking about scripts and paintings, but what is it about sound design that you believe is essential to... Good night, everyone. Good night, New Zealand.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
It's lovely.
There's two more children to come, I assume. As I was saying, I was really interested in, like, what do you think makes sound design essential to a story? So you've talked about, you know, those moments of where you first sort of read a script and you get that inspiration and follow it. But what is it about sound design that really fills out and becomes a core component of storytelling? For
me, it's the emotion. It's, I mean, anything sonic is so deeply rooted in our understanding of emotion, and conveying it in ways, like I said, that are really subtle. And music and sound do the same thing, but there's this balance of stuff. And I feel like the sound design is a lot more subtle at its job of conveying emotion.
Music goes straight to the heart.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of modern composers try and do a lot more sound design in their work. Yeah, well, because, you know, a deep rumble can stir a feeling in you, or a high shimmery sound that goes into the surrounds might make your, you know, hair stand up on end or make you feel a certain way. It's the first sense that we're born, like, you know, that we start feeling in the womb. The first sense that we develop is hearing. Yeah. What was the question again? So I got lost thinking what you were saying. Just in a nutshell.
Yeah, no. So what is it about sound design that makes it an essential part of a story?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, actually, what I think is it helping the story is a huge thing, you know, like, and so what I really try and do when I'm watching the film or reading the script is trying to find out, what can I do to help the emotion or anything come out of the screen more without me overtaking the moment, you know? And you get some directors that definitely want you to do more and want you to go over the top and that sort of thing. But most of the time, the restraint is where good sound design really comes to the fore. It's, you know, finding strength in silence, finding strength in grounding the sounds and what you see on screen. If it's a science fiction, you know, what is the object made of? What am I seeing? Is it a wooden thing? Is it made out of carbon fiber? How can I record elements to sort of wrap around that are organic, that help tell that story or bring that thing to life? But and then, you know, there's the other sound design, which is more the stingers and the ethereal washes and that sort of thing that kind of wrap around music. But I find composers do a lot more of that nowadays. Yeah. Like they tend to, because there's a whole lot of plugins that sort of have a washy sort of, you know, sound that they can throw in. A lot of composers are doing that job that sound designers we're doing sometimes, but, you know, it's all good. If we're doing our job right, you don't notice that it's there. It's like, it could be something, you know, as magnificent as a dragon or something as subtle as a door. Sometimes you walk away from a film, you're like, man, that door, so good. But it should only help to propel the story. Yeah. That's what we're aiming for, is to just wrap into it and engross you and fold you into it without pulling you out. You know, a line of dialogue that's out of sync can pull you out, and the audience doesn't forgive you on that sort of thing sometimes. You know, it's sort of, or even like, you know, some films where they're playing with sort of throwing things in the surrounds dialogue or panning the dialogue left or right. You know, sometimes a lot of the audience are so used to hearing that, they like that mono idea, the dialogue up the front and the effects. You know, you can pull people out if you experiment too much sometimes, but it depends on the director. What does the director want as well? You know, do they want to try and tell something new or experiment with something new? And then you just have to, you know, sort of imagine and bring about what they want. Yeah. And do you think there's a part of, you know, sound design, does it bring things to a production that you think other areas of production can't do or are incapable of going there? Well, we were talking about this earlier, just strangely, like the fact that you can save money on a budget for stuff that isn't on screen, you know, that you do all this world building off screen, you know. It's like, so there might be a moment in the script where the spaceship lands and you're like, oh my gosh, how can we have that in the budget for that VFX shot? And we'll just, oh no, don't worry, we'll have that spaceship land off screen and you'll just hear it. Well, even the ambience, let's say you're in a scene with a lot of tension and the you know, someone's approaching to do no good on someone and the crickets disappear. Very simple.
Yeah.
You know, just something like that, which is just all of a sudden the sound changes and you know, or you feel a change in the
having
environment.
like a motif of a certain character that, like Benedict's Spurs in Power of the Dog, you know, that becomes the sound becomes integral with the character.
A motif almost within sound design. I mean, you know, something like Lord of the Rings, when the orcs are first approaching in the Two Towers, and you just hear vroom, 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 that deep sort of rumbling marching off screen, and the, you know, King Theoden and them are sitting up on the wall looking out, and it's that tension coming from that pulsing sound. And that's all sound, you know, you're not seeing it until you see them.
And it resonates with like stuff in your body, like your own heart rate, you know, like, like, oh, there's this, one of my favorite pieces of sound design is from the movie Aliens. When they open up, they land on LV-426 and they go into this complex and they turn on their trackers and there's just this little.
Oh, that's great.
It's so quiet and so subtle, but it's just a little bit faster than the human heartbeat.
Yeah.
So you just like, you don't even notice it's happening.
It's all subtle stuff, but you know, someone's thought about that, and it's, you know, real subtle, clean sounds are sometimes best.
Yeah. And so considering that, I mean, you know, you've worked on a number of projects, right from short films with emerging talent to, you know, much bigger works with directors like Jane Campion or Denis Villeneuve. When you hear a pitch or a centre script, or, you know, someone expresses an idea for adaptation, you know, what is it that makes you commit to that work from a sound design perspective?
Number one, I mean, for me, a lot of the time it really is just that spark of something really interesting. I mean, sometimes it's just actually the way someone approaches us. I've actually got someone who approached me for a short film last week, and it was such a good email. I've got to reply to them. I just haven't had time because I've been really busy, but it was such a really thoughtful, really nice email that the person sent me. And it's just like, it's just, you know, being really nice and actually laying out, you know, this is the film that we're trying to make. Here's our script if you've got time to read it, you know. If you want to discuss things, then, you know, I also got one from someone who's just sort of said, you probably haven't got time to read this script, but, you know, here it is anyway, you know, for what it's worth. And it was exactly almost that. And I just didn't read it, you know. I'm not going to read that because it's already assuming that I'm an asshole that wouldn't read it. Excuse my language, but you know what I mean? It's sort of like, we try, I mean, we are just people, and the pressure of daily working on some of these films, as anyone else in film, you are deep in your current project and your full focus is on those projects, you know. So to come out, it's in your own time, and we don't have much at the moment. But
and when it comes to making choices, unfortunately, sometimes it's just about scheduling. So you might have block here already booked out, block there, you're trying to fill, and the first thing that comes along, you commit to it, and then you're in, and then something better comes along, but you can't take it on. That would be immoral. So I like this film better than the other one.
The other thing as well, and I really I would love the you know, the Film Commission to even hear about this one, and that's, you know, a short film is a short film, yes, but you still need to put the same amount of focus and development sound wise into creating an original palette to bring that world to life. And so the time it takes to do that, it takes time to focus and realize what that world is. If they've got a creature, if they've got those sorts of things, you still have to design that thing and bring it to life.
Yes.
And so
sometimes it takes much longer.
Yeah, we'll do 3 weeks on a short film sometimes, or more.
My last short film I did was a fantastic short film, but it spanned over a decade because the poor thing ran out of funding.
Oh, that's right.
Ran out of funding, and then I said, okay, just come back to me when you're ready. And I left it on my desktop for the 10 years just because
that's right.
I knew it would come back. It was a good film,
and it's good. Yeah, it's good.
So when at what part of the process, whether it's from an email which makes you want to learn more and read, or having read a script, when does the design first start to materialize for you?
At that point, like we've sadly had to turn down something beautiful recently. And
it was about scheduling.
Yeah, it was really about scheduling and just what we have on our plate. But I looked at some images of what it was. I read the script, and I was in. Like, my heart was in the film, and it was just so beautiful. But we were discussing the world building of that right from the first discussion on the phone.
And you start, you might even start digging through sounds, putting things together. Sometimes even if you don't end up working on it, you end up giving them something that gets them rolling or something. You give them a sound. Or
one example, is, let's say, Elysium. Like, I had a first discussion with Neil Blomkamp about that, and I remember driving in my car, pulling up the side of the road and having a conversation and recording it on my recorder, the conversation. And he then sent a whole stream of the artwork to me, of the robots, of the flying machines, all that sort of stuff. And boom, straight away, I'm gathering sounds. As soon as I see something that is in that world, I start gathering, and
then your brain is in it. So you'll go into a shopping mall and you're like, oh my gosh, hear that fridge, that sounds horrible, let's record that, it will be perfect for that film that's coming up in a couple of months or whatever.
So our weekends are pretty much filled with that sort of stuff sometimes. We're on the day job during the week, and then you'll just at night time you're out recording something for the next job or whatever. But it's an ongoing process. You're always thinking forward to the next project. A lot of it is happenstance when you hear something and you think, I've got to get it, I've got to grab it. And so we have recorders all over the place, and sometimes your phone will record something great, and if a director is somewhere, and actually we've had that a few times, and I thought, if only they'd recorded something, and they had to send me a file of something they recorded on their phone, and it goes in the film.
But there's never, in terms of choosing a project, it's never too early to start talking to sound people.
Yes,
even if they're not, they are fully busy, schedules change, things shift. Sometimes projects that you have booked in your calendar fall off, and then you need something quickly. You're like, oh my gosh, I've got 3 weeks, no work coming up, and you're scrambling to find something. So, you
never know.
It's never too late to ask. Don't be ashamed of asking late, but it's never too early.
What I like is food. So I want to be fed. I'm like a mushroom. So give me anything. Give me dialogue, talk to me about stuff, send me an email with a bit of inspiration, send some images, that sort of stuff. And all you do is you get your brain rolling and thinking about the subject matter that you're about to create for. And
the projects where you do get to come on at script level are always really rewarding in that regard, because you can offer feedback to the directors, like, hey, maybe you should do this, or whatever you do, don't record that person with the crinkly jacket.
Or don't do your period piece next to a train station or next to an ironworks factory. So there are very simple things. But then there's the opposite as well, where someone will bring you on way too late, and or you're brought on as damage control for a film that hasn't got a plan for their sound design. So
that can be fun too, but
it can be fun, but it's always stressful.
It's always about the people, though.
It really
at the end of the day, if you get on with people that you work with and they treat you with respect, then you can stomach just about anything.
Because it's a conversation. When we go into a film, it's a conversation from the beginning to the end, and then the conversation carries on with the audience.
And so, thinking about that collaboration, and you're filling up your tank to bring to the film. Can you give an example or a time when you've sound design has led, and also another time when sound design has had to follow? And how do you sort of gauge that dance between departments back and forth, knowing when to lead and when to defer or follow?
After you. I would say Arrival.
Arrival,
Yeah. Well, sound design,
Yeah.
well, we had images, but sound design led in that we didn't have, I mean, he
They
had his
hadn't-
visual language
Yeah.
was there, which was beautiful.
They hadn't animated the aliens fully, and they really wrapped their animations around what we did.
Yeah, because what we wanted to do was come up with the science behind the aliens themselves and say, okay, so how does it work? And we imagined that it was like the inside of a squid, two bones vibrating together inside the body of the alien sort of thing. And so we mentioned that to Denny, and he really resonated with that idea, and we resonated with his idea that we were speaking to
Something
spiritual, you know, sacred
yeah.
beings sort of thing. So between those two sort of things, we came up with sounds that then they animated to and changed the shape of things. Same as the water horse, a little bit of that, like the throat sort of vibrated in a part, and we came up with this sort of idea, and all of a sudden it was there in the animation, helped change that sort of thing. But and then following, a lot of times that's really where you've just designed something, but then you end up letting it go.
Yeah.
Because
or you have to keep changing because the VFX change, and you have to keep changing it over and over and over again.
Yeah, chasing the VFX tail is, you know, the new reality. It's yeah, I mean, I really wish that films would start just that little bit later, all the times that the VFX tail was fully revealed. Because, you know, you'd be able to do so much more with it and actually be able to wrap around it.
I had a friend who did a short film that was in that category. Like he was like going to get me to do the sound at the same time as the VFX, and I said, since you're self-funded and you know you're doing this on your own, make sure you just get all of your VFX done, completely locked off before you send it to me, and that way it'll streamline what I do and waste less of your time.
It's not realistic a lot of the times,
No,
though. Just
those
with,
kinds of things.
yeah, but for a short film,
yeah, short film,
yes, definitely. You know, and you know, I've been sort of talking about with show lately as well, and it's, you know, the whole landscape has changed for where films are shown and how they're shown, and how producers and directors can, you know, get their return on their films. So, you know, the cinemas are not as much of a thing anymore. You've got to get online screening and that sort of thing. So budgets change, and the time constraints change for sound as well, you know. So
yeah. I want to get into that a little bit later and give it some this space that it's due. I wanted to wrap up this part, this section of questioning with, you know, your thoughts and feelings on, like, you know, what does a great sound design feel like to you, and how do you gauge the essential from the decorative?
I would say that, you know, we've recorded an original palette of sounds and developed sounds that are original to the film. And, you know, the process of going and gathering those sounds, it's part of your life's history as well. So, you know, we're working on a film, but also the film is becoming part of my life. And so, you know,
end up with a library that's, you know, terabytes big, and you can find any file that you remember you recorded, because you've got such a
memory, a time memory. And so it's like this historical document, but so it has to have, you know, in the ideal situation, original sounds recorded and created. The music and the sound design have a beautiful conversation where the music doesn't take up all of the frequencies, and it tries to pulse and wrap around the emotion and the impacts and the hits and that sort of stuff. If someone's hitting a sword straight down on someone with a bit of armor, don't put your musical stinger right there, you know. So like just music comes out of that. So it's like it's a conversation, and so it's like and then the director has a beautiful ride. I mean, you want to make sure that they love the sound by the end. They're really happy with what they've got by the end of the film. And, you know, sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. And a lot of times it's because of preparation, not being able to have enough time to sort of really shape what you wanted, or miscommunication either by them or by, say, myself or, you know, the person doing the sound. So sometimes it's just communication, being in sync with each other and understanding what you're trying to achieve. What's the end goal?
Mm. And that's a great segue into you know, my next question was around, you know, what makes a strong collaboration, and, you know, thinking about, you know, something from your experience, what's been fundamental in cementing a strong collaboration for you, because you've worked with a number of directors and teams, you know, again and again.
I still love, yeah,
we know.
I really enjoyed the collaboration with Robert Sarkis and Out of the Blue. And, you know, he's a strong director, like, you know, definitely knows what he wants, but is willing to hear your suggestion to what, you know, you know, to hear your take on it as well.
Yeah.
And that Out of the Blue story, it was such a deep, you know, story. The Vicky and which was the producer at the time, Vicky Pope, and she allowed us the time to go down to Aramoana and record that place and gather the spirit of the place to put into the film. And that was, I knew they couldn't really afford it too much, but they knew how important that was to try and get the spirit of the place, to try and really, and, you know, we were up till 4 or 5 in the morning when we were there. We didn't go there and park up at a motel. We're there together, you know, and it was Hayden Collow and myself, effects sound designer. And he and I, we had an amazing time sort of working on that film. But it's just that sort of thing. It's that
sharing that passion for sound.
Yeah.
And similarly, like just like being passionate about sound and enabling it without overbearing, you know. It's like I was saying earlier, you get someone to play bass on your band, and you don't, instead of saying, oh, here's all the songs I've written and this is what I want you to do, you say, let's write these songs together. You know, it's about that shared shared experience of creating something.
Yeah, and there's two sides to that. There's jamming, but then there's also following the journey, coming back to the story, coming back to what grounds all of us, and that's the story at the heart of it all, and your understanding of it.
Yeah, you have to be able to not be precious about stuff like, you know, you can lay up all these sounds and then the composer will put this amazing piece of music and the director's like, actually, let's try it without sounds. And you have to be willing to just trust their vision and say, look, that's fine. I did my job and I've got all those really great sounds I can use on another film.
yeah. But yeah, it's interesting.
It's about, at the end of the day, if the client is happy, then you've done your job.
Yeah, you have. I want to be happy too.
Yeah.
And that really is about, you know, how deep you go and how hard you tried, you know, to really get everything that they wanted. You know, I've definitely failed on a few times. I won't say that, but like I definitely have dropped the ball on a few projects, and it's either, you know, maybe something personal in your life, or perhaps you didn't connect with the story and that sort of thing. And it does happen to everyone. But, you know, ultimately you're really just trying to, you're an artist and you're trying to bring an artist perspective, a sound artist perspective to the film, and try and honor the work that's gone on for years before it comes to you. And that's a really important one, you know. It's like this, sound is like this, you know, the film's above us and we're down here. We're
the last link in the chain. We're the only people that get to see that whole process come to, you know, fruition.
And it's good to respect that process and sort of feel for what's come before, you know.
We've touched on it a little bit in terms of some of the technical aspects of, you know, there's never it's never too early to approach sound design and collaborate with sound design to have that conversation. But I'm interested in what you think, you know, for, say, a writer or a producer, what do they need to consider when making an invitation to sound designers?
I would say a writer. put in sound cues, like you tell us what you hear in the script. It's such an important part of world building, is understanding where you are, and most people that have written good scripts, it's there. But explaining things sometimes. Oh, there was a flute that played a tune and it sounded like something. I'm just off the top of my head, but like, do try and give those descriptors where it's not taking up all your pages, but keeping your script tight. But I literally go through and I will mark up the entire script with a highlighter, and then I will go through and I will type up an Excel document of a basic list of what I think I'm going to do with that script. I did that with even Pirates of the Caribbean, the very first one. I was so excited to sort of be asked to help on that film, but I could only see the script. I wasn't allowed to see the film. With
because
because it was Disney, and because it just wasn't possible at the time. Right. But I read it, I made up my whole thing, and then sent a palette of sounds that I recorded with Matt Lambourne, and we went off and nailed an amazing palette for that.
And in Arrival, they sent us the short story, the film and the script. So we had the original short story written by, I can't remember the
Story of Your Life.
It's called. I can't remember who wrote it, but so we read that and marked that up first, and then we got the script, and it was really a long time. Like we were sort of working on it for a couple of weeks before we
just based on those thoughts. And anyway, so then the producers. So the producers really need to protect the director's sound interests, I think. And they need to know that they've got money in the budget for ADR. I mean, if you are shooting quick and on the fly and you don't have a good boom op or sound recorder, which most of them are, amazing people. But if you've got someone inexperienced and you don't have the material, then make sure that you've got an ADR budget, because, it can't all be fixed with RX. It can't all be fixed in post. And there's something about those initial performances. Your actors are there in costume, on set, putting their hearts on the camera. They're doing it there. That's the time to gather what you can. The rest of it is you're just fixing it up. But I also think that they, things like, let's say you've got a hero car. Just a practical sort of an example. And it's this, V12 special beast that no one else in the world has got, and you've got it for a few days. Record it. Make sure that you allow time for the recorders to record that, because it's hard for us to go post that and have the production pay for us to go and record this vehicle at a separate time, because then you've got to hire the car again, that sort of stuff. I mean, and most of the time,
that happens a lot.
It does happen a lot. And I get it. Like, I directed a film and we got this Land Rover.
He broke all the rules.
Yeah, I drove. It had kids and it had animals in it. Anyway, went and picked up this vehicle from the middle of nowhere, brought it to this location. It was raining. There was no time. And we didn't record it. So I broke my own rules. So,
And in the middle of summer, so it was covered in cicadas.
Yeah, I know. So and the dialogue. So, rules get broken, but, where you can, if you're on the long haul, you've got a feature film, protect yourself by understanding what you're going to need to record, capture, and then provide for your director later on,
even if you don't have a sound person in mind and that kind of stuff yet, start thinking about it early
and allow them time for a mix. It depends on the film. Sometimes they just flow and it's right, but allow time to pre-mix the sounds so that we can get the sounds that you've created in Pro Tools. You might spend 7 weeks, you might spend 8 months building up your soundtrack. Give it the love you need to shape each of those elements ready for the final mix.
If you've been writing a script for 8 years and directing it and planning it, and you take all this time to do this big massive process, I mean, why would you then only spend 4 weeks on a sound edit and 1 week on a sound mix? It's like you're really just cutting it short of the process that it takes.
Well, I mean, it has worked before.
No, it has, but I'm just saying,
what it does, it takes the joy out of the process. it takes the joy out.
Yeah.
It's not fun, and I wouldn't want to do that, you know, because that's a short film. That's a short film amount of time. And you know, films are getting faster because of, you know, the technology that we have and that sort of thing, but sometimes they just shouldn't be faster. Sometimes you should just take the time to try and find a way to let the conversation go for a longer period of time, so it develops into something stronger.
Yeah.
Because for me, what I'm hearing in the way you're describing your process and you know, the best sort of working conditions, it feels very much like you are speaking as a writer. That there's a tremendous amount of going out and researching and finding and putting in the pocket because of you know, you've had an instinctual feeling about something. You don't know where it's going to be useful, but you're going to put it in the sack of things that you're collecting.
So much research.
Yeah.
I mean, we are always researching everything, like, you know, from what different materials are to make different sounds, to the different creatures, to locations, to the type of bird in a particular area. And that's why it's actually quite tricky working on a lot of projects, the bigger projects, where you can't have the internet on your main system. And so you've got to constantly go and check something over here and then come back over here and that sort of thing. So it's tricky, but you work around it. But research is massive. I spend a lot of time really digging deep on what I'm creating a sound for and what it is and how I can make it better, or what I could ground it with, you know.
And I would think that that kind of material and research being at the table earlier in a process could only enhance everyone's job and everyone's department.
Well, that's where the lookbook and the script, you know, that sort of thing, the, you know, production Bible are the most amazing things. You know, someone has taken all that time to create that beautiful guide of how it's going to look and feel, and that's just an emotional you know, gold mine for sound. Like, just share it with sound straight away if you have someone in mind, you know. And
it doesn't need to be like, it's not like you need to come on, you know, months early on the payroll or anything. You know, you get shared this stuff and we will look through it and we'll think, wow, that's cool, and that's coming up in 6 months, and then it just goes to the back of your head and you're working on your current project. But every now and then those thoughts tick around and then you, oh, look, today we're here out of here. It's so much like that project that's coming up. Let's record that.
Yeah, exactly. But you understand in your mind, you've got that feeling of that film in your head, and the back of your mind is stirring there because you have those images and those things in the script that you've read. And you, because as you say, you know, it's like a writer. Over time, you understand the story so well. You understand the characters, and you're trying to get into the character's journey the most. I mean, I'm not trying to create a spaceship. I'm trying to find out, you know, how that spaceship connects with the whole thing.
Who's the culture behind the spaceship?
And trying to find a new spaceship that doesn't exist, you know. But you know, it's kind of you've got to have that happy ground in between it, and the fun thing is actually just giving surprises to people as well, giving them happy surprises out of it, and surprising yourself through that voyage of discovery.
Yeah. So from your experience, I mean, you were talking about, you know, starting, you know, before many other departments in some ways, and yet sound design is, you know, one of the biggest issues within the industry is that it comes on so late, and I would think from my experience that there's a perception of it being tech-based in a suite. Done via computers, but what you're talking about is a whole world building, again, that place of the author.
Well, you're talking to an artist, I guess, you know. And I guess the thing is, like, to give someone a bit of food for thought early on is free. You know, it's free to brief someone really well as to what your project is, and to invite them into your world is free. And so you might bring someone on 3 or 4 months beforehand and feed them all this information. They've been on your project for 4 months. They've been thinking about that project for 4 months, and they may well have a big bag of goodies that they've already gathered because they know what your project is, you know. So there's that sort of thinking as well, where a lot of times we will be gathering things for films that are coming up
But,
months ahead of time.
It is amazing though how many people, and not just film people, just people you talk to, that you say you do sound for film, and they kind of can't wrap their head around that. Like, you know, like Pirates of the Caribbean, wasn't it all recorded on set? You know, like, what do you mean sound design? What do you have to do?
Yeah, well, that was sound effects recorders.
I was using that as an example.
Yeah,
because, you know,
totally.
people just they don't, you know, there's no dragon. I didn't record a dragon for whatever it was.
Yeah.
But in terms of the industry and this problem with, you know, getting to the low end of the, you know, the money's running out in the budget, and that's where you come in as the entry point. What do you think's the main issue with contributing to that sort of, you know, what feels like an unintentional, you know, non-appreciation of the role of sound designer? What are the factors from your point of view?
I don't think that there's a problem with working on projects that are low budget. I think the problem is once you get there, unraveling something that hasn't been, it hasn't unraveled the way it should with the time constraints that you have. So, you know, if we choose to take on a lower budget film, it's because, number one, it's a beautiful story, and the person who
or their friends,
friends always get there too. But like it's kind of like you've got to be enamored by the story, but then you know, the edit just has to be advanced. You have to get the edit to a point where it's easy to come onto the sound and start rolling into it. I mean, nowadays we can conform very easily with the conformalizer and those sorts of things, but ideally you don't want to be doing that too much when you're in a 7-week track lay for a film, or a 5 or a 6 week track lay for a film. You know, and it's just hard to give it the love if all of a sudden I mean, actually we still do the midnight hours. We work till 2 in the morning all the time.
There's no
too
easy
much
solution for it, unfortunately.
It just means more work. So like films come along and then we end up pre-mixing the sounds at night, the middle of the night, because we know that there's not enough time to mix. And then it gets to the mix and it all sounds great, but there was so much work under the hood to get it to there.
And then you're burnt out and you're exhausted for the next project you're on, and you're shortchanging it. And you end up, you know, there's things in your life, you celebrations and things you miss out on, and
well, you don't exercise.
You don't exercise,
and all that sort of stuff hits the ground.
It's
However,
but that's the culture I'd like to see develop.
We will still do lots of, you know, low budget projects. It's still,
you just got to manage your time.
And they just have to understand that sometimes we are booked a year to 2 ahead of time. You know, so we are booked out a lot of times. But
we'll always have other people that we know might be able to do it. If we can't.
Not enough at the moment. No. Not enough. But
so with that in mind, what do you think that, you know, looking forward to the future, what's the much needed opportunity in the New Zealand film industry that's needed to, you know, develop this better collaboration with sound designers, but also ensure that sound designers in the future are coming through the ranks as well?
I always kind of wish that, you know, within the film funding, that there was the budget for the shoot, and then the post-production budget came later and was only for post-production, so that you were guaranteed to actually have that available separated for sound.
Because the amount of times they just use it.
It's and not intentionally.
No,
I mean,
it's not malicious.
What do you do when you're backed up against the wall and you've got to deliver some pictures and that sort of thing, and then, you know, sound just ends up being crushed up and that sort of thing. But the other thing is that there need to be more opportunities for young upcoming sound designers to be brought on as interns on films, and whether there's, you know, whether the Sound Guild and Composers Guild or someone ends up being able to find some sort of way to be able to get interns on board these films to sit with us wherever we are, and come on to be trained by us and by other sound designers and sound facilities. You know, that there are, like, I know there's a shortage of sound designers for film at the moment, you know, young up and coming assistants and sound effects editors and that sort of thing. You you know, we're not in a situation to have one at the moment, just because we have moved into the middle of nowhere. And we're trying to come to terms with it ourselves, but at some stage we really want to try and embrace that whole idea of always training new people. And trying to really share that knowledge and that gift, because, you know, it's no big thing to give that away. It's a gift. Share the knowledge. And
I don't know, I'd be keen to hear your opinion of, like, you know, stickability. You've obviously, you know, had, you know, been able to keep doing what you love, and you'll continue with your artistry, but it's obviously hard for people to, you know, have a career in a very specific design area across the board in film, but particularly in sound design. It seems that the stickability factor is just not there. And what do you think contributes to that?
Well, it's many factors. It's rough these days because a lot of people are starting, you know, doing things later and later and later in life. You know, kids are going to university later, or, you know, taking on new jobs. Like a lot of entry-level people are around 30 coming into sound, and that's the same age as you want to start having like a house and a family and those sorts of things. And so it's really challenging to try and because the reality of it is you do have to always do low budget short films and cheap things at the beginning. We still both do free things every year.
Yeah, I'd say the only thing that's kept me afloat over the years is being diverse.
Yeah, and saying yes to everything, and
also being able to compose as well as sound design. So that really helped me be able to get where I am now, sort of thing. You know, I would compose for short films, and then from there I got some adverts, and the odd advert would pay the bills for a while, same as a director or a producer, you know, like, and that would get us through a really hard time. At one stage I was going to put Sweet Saatchi on my wall, but, you know, it was because they saved our house several times, but not anymore. Don't get many ads anymore. Yeah, it's kind of it's about being diverse. It's also about being an artist and being honest with your clients, you know, and giving them your I don't know, I really open up. Like if I'm trying to give a brief to someone about sound design, and I really try and go on the emotional content of the film or on the creature, and really trying to just ground them in the belief that I know what they want. You know, like, you know, even if it's all lies, you find your way there, and you try and you're world building before you've even started, and you try and wrap yourself into it, and that has helped keep getting work, because and also individual opportunities that help me get there as well, and the kindness of individuals who trusted people, and the power of trust in individuals is cannot be overrated. You know, Peter Jackson for trusting me to come onto his films. You know, whether he knew I was or not when I was starting out, because I was an effects editor, I don't know, but, you know, ended up being able to do some beautiful projects with him. Or Scott Reynolds for The Ugly, and Heaven, when I came off short films, and he gave me my first feature film. Trust, you know, in someone to come on board and bring their film to life. And, you know, I messed up on that. I lost the entire reel one the day before we were meant to pre-mix it, and I had to fix it all that night for an entire reel of The Ugly, and that was ugly. I bawled my eyes out, but that was my first feature film, and I just, yeah, good lesson learned.
I'd also say as well, equal to trust is generosity.
Yes,
because, you know, it's that thing, like, you know, you'll get whatever you give, you'll get back threefold. You know, if you keep on giving to, you know, your fellow colleagues that, you know, you started out with in film school or whatever, you keep on giving, sharing sounds with your other colleagues, and going to meetings, going to things, and giving to directors, you know, say, oh, you know, I don't have a lot of time for your project, but, you know, you do what you can.
Yeah, share everything you can, because it'll come back.
It will come back. People remember.
Yeah. But sometimes you just don't have the energy to do it. and yeah, a couple of times I just haven't been able to get back to people. I must admit, I've got to get better sometimes at just writing. I loved your email, and like that director the other day, I will write to them.
And there
tomorrow.
are definitely times that, you know, as happy-go-lucky as we seem, there's definitely times where you're jaded as, and you're like, I just don't know why I'm doing this.
I worked 118 hours on a film one week, and that's way too many hours. And
you break down, you cry.
The crew were all crying. It just got to the point, it was hideous. It wasn't, you know. And
you share these battle stories with each other, and then you think, well.
But as my beautiful friend Mike Hopkins, who passed away, said, it's just an effing film. At the end of the day, you know, he gave me 2 lessons. It was that one, and actually for you guys, for sound, this is a good one. You know, there are low frequencies, there are low mids, there are high mids, and there are high. The perfect soundtrack is a beautiful balance of those things. I mean, it's a very simple lesson, but that's all you need to know.
Yeah.
And you can't, there's not.
Sometimes you have time to go deep and do all this, and then other times you just got to grab something you had in the library and shove it in there, and, you know. Yeah,
that happens too. So, you know, we're not like, oh, we got to record all the new sounds. It's not that. We will use what we need to at the time.
Yeah.
And actually, I do want to talk about something else too, and that's the guide track. And the thing is, like, we do honor the work that an editor and a director spend creating that backbone to their story. You know, like, you do spend time in there trying to get the nuances and that sort of thing, and the shaping and that sort of thing to try and do it. But believe that sound can make it better. Like, you know, if something's really truly precious to you at a point on your guide, you know, maybe just say, I really don't want that to be broken. That is how I love it to be. If you can make it better, do it. But, you know, that's the sort of information you really want to hear. And the other stuff you really want to hear is, I only want music here.
Don't even bother putting in all those.
Just don't put it in.
Giant trolls.
Although sometimes saying that, it's easier to put in a sound and mute it later on than be on the mix stage where you're paying thousands a day and not have anything under the fader. So, you know, that's the opposite side of that.
Especially stuff like Foley, you know.
Yeah.
Or just cover the whole thing.
Because... and have a voice too. I think, you know, directors having a voice and saying, I really want this, and not having a voice too late.
The giant moth trying to get in.
It's a giant moth. It's really loud.
It's a great sound.
Yeah.
So just want to pick up on one thing before we sort of move into question time. You know, you talked a lot about generosity being, you know, a huge part of the industry and learning. Where can the industry, especially producers, directors, and writers, where can they support this role of the fifth author, the sound designer being an integral part of production, and recognizing the, you know, the essential nature of them to the building of a film?
I think just including them in the conversation as early as you would like.
And
it's like I say, it's free to say to someone, this is the world we're creating and we're excited to maybe bring you on board. And that sort of approach will usually get you on board. You know, it will usually have us on board, because it's like, oh wow, they've got such belief in what they're doing. They're not just building this world, they're also building this world around them to create this world. You know, and that's a beautiful thing, is to have an amazing crew who believe in what you do.
And like, as much like monetary wise, money is always important. It's not, you know, it's not a bad thing to say that it's important to be able to survive. But in terms of time, like, the worst thing is when you've like, oh, we only have this amount of time, you know, the mix is locked in here, or I want to get it to Cannes, or there's a release date here that's locked in, and we've left it too late, but we only have this amount of time to get it done. And that's harsh.
It's
Yeah.
harsh, but
it is a reality.
it is a reality.
But
Yeah, I mean, it's
if
just,
you can avoid that.
but knowledge is power. That's
Yeah.
actually that's the short answer for that. Because if you knew there was a tent that's coming, you know, or if you knew there was that deadline early, then
Yeah.
it's like, you know, even in those early conversations, say, okay, we're going to start in you know, May, but just be aware that in June, at the end of June, we've got a tent mix, so it's really early in the piece, and you go, oh, sweet. So I've got to just build like hell the whole track within the first 4 weeks to get version 1. And that's what I'd say is, what we want to do is we want to arrive at version 1 of our sound design, or of the soundtrack, or of the dialogue track, as quickly as possible, so that then we can quickly get to version 2, because version 2 will always be better. Sometimes not. Sometimes you go, I like what you did last time, and that's when backups come in handy, you know. So you just have to, you know, it's that arriving at version 1 so you can quickly move on and make it better. For me, version 1 is just shaping. I shape. It's like creating you know, churches on the corner of a city. It's like, you know, you're throwing up buildings and you're throwing up framework.
Paint on the canvas.
Yes, it's that. It's fully that. And then from there, you start to understand your own architecture of what you're creating. You start to understand the emotions of what you're creating, and what then you can mute, or where I really need to go and record this thing. And we always do that. Like at the moment, we have so many records that we need to do for things, and
knowing where things that can be dense and really, you know, I'm going to spend heaps of time building lots of layers here, other parts where it's really sparse, like Miyazaki's tracks, where you know, there's just one cricket for 5 minutes and you're like, wow, that's so cool, and
it's so perfect. You know,
that's great. And we've got a question in from David G. What is your approach to trends or fads in sound design? As in, we see some films sounding very similar. Is that something to avoid? As a sound author, do you think it needs to blend in or stand out within the genre?
It does depend a lot on the film in particular.
Yeah, I'd say that you're just trying to create original voice for the film. So if the visuals look a certain way, hopefully you've created sounds or wrapped into that, into what it looks like anyway, you know, so you are building for that particular thing. So it should sound how it looks. But I know what you mean, the Brahms or the, you know, the sort of sub hits really, and that funny, sort of thing. You know,
that particular one, the boo, I don't know. I mean, I feel like the first time I ever saw it was on Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, that was debatable. Yeah, for Sauron's ring. But anyway, it's but it's kind of like I wouldn't worry too much about that, because you're just trying to create your world.
You can't, at the end of the day, you can't avoid being a reflection of the time and the culture you live in. And films, you know, they will be dated to a certain time to a certain extent, and that's not necessarily always a bad thing, because you can look back and go, wow, look at those hairstyles. And in Star Wars, they're all the same as the 70s, and the sounds are all classic 70s sounds as well.
I mean, I say this a lot, but like, and it's not always true, but like, you know, films don't use as much stock footage, you know, like you do sometimes, but like if you don't use stock sounds, then it's not going to sound like another film in a way. If you have the time to create new stuff and go and record new things, then it's going to have an original voice. It's only going to sound like your film. It's okay to be influenced by people and influenced, you know. I mean, at one stage, lens flares started flying all over the place on every film, you know, and there was a new plugin that everyone was using. That's fine. It's sort of like like you say, a sign of the times visually.
But it's like,
sound-wise, it's plugins. A new plugin will turn up like a delay, like Slapper, beautiful delay plugin that, you know, has amazing echoes. Valhalla reverb's really cheap, but beautiful reverb.
And ultimately, no matter what you do, it always has your voice on it.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, you know, you can give 50 bakers the same cake recipe and you'll get 50 different cakes. And so, you know, as much as you try and copy stuff, you'll always sound different.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Got a question here from Isla. How many versions do you deliver on average? Is it like drafts of a script and a known system of your passes?
That's a tricky one.
Again, different.
I usually do one. So and like, so unless director asks for versions, but I really try and avoid that. I mean, what you're trying to do is understand the script and the material before you get there, and then just put your best foot forward. What is it?
It's Kiwi.
Kiwi. Put your best foot forward right from the start, you know. So, and then you get notes from the director, and then you modify it because something in there should be right. You know, like if you're doing a creature and it's a, you know, at least that part of the mouth might be okay that you did, and then you just got to change the roar, which is always the hardest thing. But
yeah,
something will work.
When we talk about versions, often that's like a first draft. It's not necessarily like doing.
Yeah, that's true.
Sometimes there'll be one thing that the director will be like, I want to hear 3 different versions of that spaceship, and you're like, oh, but I'll do it, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas for the most part, it's just a first draft of a story that evolves.
Yeah, version 1, version 2. I mean, as a production, the bigger productions, as they go through their versions of the film and things change. You know, like the Ornithopters for Dune sort of thing, you know. They started off as one thing, and you know, they just developed as we went on and on, you know. But it's just, yeah, it's just getting that version 1 as soon as possible, so you can move on to version 2. And version 2 might just be a tweak of what you've done in version 1, but it's based on the notes and the thoughts from the director. And you just try and, so every now and then I go, whoa, we really didn't hit the mark on something, because the director said, no, I really need it to be like this. And you go, cool, get rid of it all and then start fresh. And that happens a lot too. So, and that's that whole thing about not being precious.
Yeah. Got a question from Mary Lynn here. Can you speak to some examples of directors you've worked with in the ways they worked with you that was helpful to you doing your job?
That's a long list.
It is. I would say just recently, Jane Campion was really cool. I read the script and I went down this rabbit hole of trying to understand each of the characters and their little idiosyncrasies, and trying to really go really micro on them, you know, really you know, just getting really into the tiniest thing. And we went, the first time I met her, we went and had a coffee, and she said, just think about the entire world, think about the entire world that they live in first, and then, you know, the rest will come, sort of thing. But it was like, you know, actually I'd been thinking about where they were in Montana, but I was really trying to go in deep on each of the characters. I mean, later on I kind of did, but it was a good thought, because then we could work on the winds and the character of the house and the character of the prairies and those sorts of things. And you know, working with the Australian crew was just wonderful. Really had a really good experience with that.
And for me, is very similarly actually working with Briar and Ainsley on Cousins. They're a good example of a short, I mean, small budget film, but they brought me on at script level because they knew that they had a very limited budget, very limited time, and so they knew that their budgetary constraints meant that they had limited opportunity to give feedback. That, you know, that we had to work really fast and really intense, but they gave me lots of lease of imagination and creative exploration, and it was just really well, very good collaboration, and very generous and respectful.
It was quite funny. I mean, I felt like I did a bit of pushback on that when they sort of said the time that they had to do some of the things, but they had it so well planned. They did have a plan, you know, they knew what they were doing. And so, you know, I was proven very wrong on that one. And I really love the sound of the entire film and how it turned out, and the look, the film itself, you know. But that's sort of an example where I'm sort of thinking, okay, how long have we got to do the film? How long has Shell got to do the film? And we work together on the budgets and the planning and that sort of thing all the time. I mean, it's sort of, you know, we protect each other that way, you know. But that was amazing. It was really cool. And Night Raiders, that was cool too.
A question from Richard. Do you have time to listen to other people's work? Do you have any films that you consider a benchmark in great design at the time? You're blown away by How to Train Your Dragon, when it first came out. So any movies you walked, also any movies you walked out of with your jaw on the floor?
We spend most of our free time watching movies because we're that lazy.
Oh no, we're on the academy, so you got to watch I feel like you got to watch the films, you know.
Yeah.
And so we really do due diligence on watching them. Actually, I said to the guys before, we got a leak in our house from the Northland storm the other day. So in our lounge, there's water pouring from the ceiling. And we watched the tragedy of Macbeth last night with drips.
I was like, it's like we're in a leaky castle. It's perfect.
And it was like, it put a whole new spin on the film. But it was like, but yeah, we do.
I mean,
influences and
Star Wars, Aliens, Terminator. Those are the ones that when I was a kid I watched. Probably too young, but I watched them, and I was in a sonic world that I knew it completely affected me.
Oh, totally. I mean, I'm the classic Star Wars at the cinema when I was a kid, and the spaceship goes through the screen, and I loved it. But I also really loved the old black and white films like The Fly, Nosferatu, like really old films that kind of were the black and whites where there was silence and a footstep, and then out of that comes dialogue and a shriek and so much feeling, and that's what drove me to get into film. Yeah,
some of those early ones where they do incredible things with like only 4 tracks, like Zulu or. But
I'd say like the Ben Burt's, Randy Tom, I found very inspiring. Just some of the work he's done years ago and actually now. But just
constantly films flooring me.
Yeah. I mean, there's people all around the world that we've worked with and that influence us. With Peter Albrightson, he's a really cool guy. He did that. What was it called? Truffle Hunters.
Truffle Hunters, yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing. It just simple stuff.
Simple things.
It was a documentary. The reverbs that he used to really have someone having a conversation in the background, or a dog, and just that slap that happened. It was subtle, but it was beautiful. It's just things like that. And all I'd say to directors and producers as well is try and notice sound. Like I know the Academy at the moment is. And even the BAFTAs, I was disappointed the other day, watching it, and all of a sudden they had a little segment at the end where they showed the sound awards and the editors and the short films, and the whole thing really, it's an engine, it's a machine, the entire film, the creation of it. And if you didn't have sound, you'd soon complain. Like if there was no sound, there'd soon be an award, or they'd soon have them back on that award.
You mentioned How to Train Your Dragon. I mean, animations are just amazing. You get nothing on those. There's just the ADR of the actors.
Yeah.
Like we worked on Tintin, and you had to build every single sound from the ground up. And those animations are amazing.
Oh, totally.
Another question from Richard around IP. How does IP work for you?
Generally speaking, a production, as I say, we create an original voice for original film. So, really that's kind of our modus operandi when it comes to films. I mean, then there are the things that are kind of like hammers and nails. So if you have, say, you outside with a hammer banging a rock in the middle of the night, and I've done 50 of those banging rocks and I've hurt my arm doing it, I may well use that rock again somewhere, but that's what I would call a nail. And often we are the hammer, but we
don't sign away for the most part.
Sounds. It depends on the film.
Yeah, it does depend on the film.
The big films,
you certainly you get good at really hiding things, and you only use those hammers and nails, and you regurgitate them in different ways.
Yeah. I mean, they really are just like a wind is a wind, unless it's a wind you've designed that's really specific. Which they exist.
That Hollywood edge wind you could spot a mile away.
Every time everyone puts it in every film. But we archive everything, so we put metadata into all our files, and we have terabytes of data, spanning the years that I've worked. I have all the raw recordings that I've made, and we have our own security. We have you know, encrypted drives, yada yada, that sort of thing. And when we're working on big productions, we have cameras, we have safes, we have all that sort of thing, which is totally what you need to do. You know, that's the new territory that we work in. VFX people are the same, but that's the level of trust that they have in you to do that film, is to actually honor their process and actually keep their material safe, keep their 20 years of materials, you know, like of planning safe, you know, because it won't be 2 years or 3 or 5 years. A lot of times
one of the things that we're almost more careful with than our own sounds is sounds gifted from other fellow colleagues.
Yeah, other sound designers.
They go into a vault.
Yeah,
you know,
we write their name on it, and if I went to use something again of theirs, I'd actually ask. So, you know, but yeah, they're our tools. I mean, they really are. A lot of times they're reference for us too. You know, you'll listen to a sound, but
they're like your pets.
Pokemon. We are Pokemon collectors. We collect Pokemon's sounds. I want everyone.
Got another question from Joe here. What advice would you give to sound designers and sound folk in NZ just starting out in the industry?
It's a hard road, and I know it's harder now than when I started out. I definitely know that.
Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask questions, and offer your services wildly and freely. Yeah,
do short films. Like do try and do short films. What you're trying to do is find your team in a way. And like one really beautiful team that I had was James Cunningham and Paul Swedell. And Paul passed away a few years ago, but I know that we would have moved on doing more and more things together, you know. He's just a beautiful guy. But he was my team. My very first short film was with Paul Swedell. And from his little short film, A Little Death, that's what Scott Reynolds saw. And that's why he gave me The Ugly. And that was because I had my team, and because I started, and we went all in. We didn't know what we were doing at all. You know, we had a sampler and we were recording things out. We turned up at the film unit back in the day, and Mike Hedges saw this thing that we had borned, and it was a hideous beast. But you know, made it work, and we did the music and the sound design for that. But that was, our friendships went on, and we kept developing things. And James went into doing it. Actually, James did the still photography for that. Now he does animations, and him and Paul went on to do other things. So they became a team. But it's about finding those pairings. You know, you may not be young, I'm not sure, but like still finding your people, your close-knit people that you can bounce off. But do ask if you need advice and stuff.
That's great. We got a question from Thomas. What are some go-to tools for a beginner sound designer? And are there any recommended practices, exercises that can be done to build skills before getting to the point of working in the film industry?
EQ, pitch shift,
everything basic. You do not need anything fancy.
Dirty old D verb.
Yeah, that was good.
That comes inbuilt in Pro Tools, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, but my first films I did on an Audio Media 3 card, which at the time was terrible. It was next to my kids' bedroom, and they were babies at the time, crying. And
some of my most creative work I've ever done was when I was, you know, a teenager in a room with hardly any equipment, and it's just, you know, you've got to get yourself into that headspace. It doesn't matter the tools you have.
I had one microphone. It was an old Sony Eclectic something. I can't even say it anyway, but it was electric. But anyway, it was $5 from the secondhand store, and that was my little condenser microphone. And that's all I had for 3 years when I started out, and I recorded everything I could with that microphone until Hidden Melbourne lent me one for a while.
Even if you have to use your phone.
Yeah.
You know, like you're better recording something than nothing. Yeah.
I mean, all I would do, if you can't afford much, I would just get a handheld recorder, something like a little Sony. Yeah, secondhand, whatever you need to. and your sounds, your personal sounds that you record are your hammers, and your nails, they're your building blocks.
No one else has them.
Yeah, that gives you an original voice. And if you can provide an original voice to the people that you're working with, you can't fail, especially if you wrap that with being a nice person. You know, being nice it goes a long way.
Another question from Trent here, sort of relative to what we've just said. Hi all, I'd love some advice on breaking out of advertising and into the drama sound post-industry. Been working around New Zealand for the last 7 years in a professional context, but I found myself pigeonholed to sound for TVCs and advertising. Don't get me wrong, I love what I do and I feel lucky to get to earn a living from this work. But when I started out, I had big dreams of working in drama. How do I break the TVC habit?
The thing about TVC is that it's a little bit like crack cocaine in that you get paid well generally. And the thing is that you need to understand that if you pull back, you know, you might have to lower the amount of income for a while and do long form. Everything has more space. So what you're looking for, if you're going from advertising, less compression, you know, in a technical sense, you're not going for the big sounds anymore. It's not about that. It's about going for the quiet dynamics and the smaller things in the room and trying to find the emotion rather than the hit points. And it's really kind of, it's a very different practice, I would say. And just, you need to slow down and breathe, and then you can do some drama. But
also physically, in terms of, you know, just networking, go to the places where film people are, go to the big screen symposium or whatever functions are on, watch films and go where the directors are and talk to people, talk to other sound people.
If you want to do a drama, you will do one. That's it. So if you really want to do it, you will just go and you will find one, because there will be one that will love to have you, but you just have to believe it. So you need to just believe that you want to do that, and it'll happen.
Kia ora. I got one here from Emmy. Did you have any mentors at the beginning of your sound design careers? Any advice on how to go about finding one?
Always. I'm full of mentors, just because I took the the education route, because I'm from Australia and I didn't know anyone over there in film sound, so I had to keep studying and studying and studying and studying, and so I developed all these mentors. Eventually one of them knew someone in New Zealand. I'm like, aha, I'm out of here. But yeah, that, you know, anyone who's done something is a mentor, a potential mentor, and grab onto them and suck what you can out of them.
I had a few, and I'll actually say who they are. There was Ian Worley, who was at the University of Waikato, and he put me in a little MIDI room in 1990, and it was a closet, but he believed in me and gave me an opportunity, and that was really the building blocks of me starting to get into doing what I do. And then I met Hidini Melbourne walking around that same campus, and he took me along to the Once Were Warriors recording of the Purerehua. And so that was my introduction to feature films, was going along to that session at Stebbings Recording Studios. And that was freakish. I was just walking along with a microphone and said, oh, what are you up to? And then, you know, then all of a sudden opportunity, and you go along with it. And then I would say Paul Swedell, who really opened my eyes up to the bizarre film world of Tetsuo and all sorts of other weird films. But it was something that was completely foreign to me. You know, I was all Terminator and that sort of stuff, but he opened me to the macabre and the bizarre, which was really a great thing as well. And then I would say Mike Hopkins, who passed away, and he's like, he did some great things for sound in New Zealand and opened a lot of doors, and opened his personal door to making roast for us every now and then at his house. But he was, it's that sharing, and it's that conversation from the time you're learning your craft to the conversation when you're making a film.
I should have said my mentors' names.
You can say.
Well, it was Liam Egan in Australia who really gave me my foot up, and Brenton and Dave once I got here.
Brent Burge.
Yeah, but even people like my high school English teacher was really a fundamental mentor to me, Jane Potaka, and she just made me believe in my own ideas, and it's an easy thing to allow that for somebody else. You know, you don't need to be.
Yeah, one thing I'd also say, and this is true for most directors that I know, is that they are so talented. I mean, they have so many talents. It's so multifaceted, and that's the thing about the film industry, is that not just, you know, we are always just trying to use all of our talents, whether it's writing, we're writing our thoughts, you know, whether it's sewing something because we're making some armor thing, or we're
making a hole in the roof to let more water out.
Yeah, but, you know, like, honestly, talents, like, you know, it's just, you know, making it in New Zealand is about using all of your talents, because sometimes you have to do something you don't expect because your line of work isn't working. But that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to switch out sometimes, you know, it's just life now.
Yeah. Question from David G. What do you expect is generally expected from a director, producer, production in terms of music prior to shooting, and also the quantity, early quality? Can you elaborate?
That's a tricky one, because if you're, you know, nowadays people are so used to hearing such elaborate mock-ups from composers, you know. I would say find your pieces of music that inspire you for your track. Do try and listen to a lot of music and try and find what inspires the feeling that you're trying to go for. And you know, choosing your composer, really, that is really, you need to trust someone can sort of wrangle the emotion that you're after, you know, because you know, you're really entrusting the heart of the film. The music is so important to the emotional thread. The quantity and content, I mean, it's really about what you want. And that spotting session at the start of a film, if you have an edit, you know, completed edit, sitting there and discussing where you envisaged music, you know, where you, or trying to say what the actor is feeling, or what maybe you're not portraying with what you've shot, but what you really want to tell through music. You know, that's you need to find, and this is the same for sound, you need to find your way of describing to a composer or a sound designer in sound or music terms, in your sound or music terms, what you want. And there's no right or wrong there. Don't feel like, you know, you don't understand the composition for music, or how music is structured, or that I'm going to get it wrong and they're going to laugh at me. You just describe in your best terms possible what you're after, your mind's ear, you know, how does that sound? And those descriptives are going to mean that the composer is not going to compose too much music. It's going to be just in the moments where you want it. They know that don't need to go over the top. They know that you don't want a full orchestra. They know that they're okay with just having some guitar textures, because number one, it's going to save you a budget. They know that you hate piano, or they know that you, you know, this sort of thing that you need to say, like, it is what you don't like, what you do like, but through conversation, you'll know that anyway. You would have figured that out before you get to sitting in front of the film, because hopefully you kind of understand each other in some sort of way. It's not always the way, but, like, you know, it seems logical.
And we've got a final question here from Kevin. Do you ever have discussions with location sound recorders in advance of production and make any specific requests?
Yeah, a lot of times. Yeah, mainly about sort of, you know, if, let's say for The Power of the Dog, there's a whole lot of cows, and luckily Richard Flynn was all over it, so he completely nailed that. And they had so many shooting days where they had the cattle that I had a plethora of cows to wade through, so that was wonderful. And they recorded the vehicles as much as they could, but we wanted to go and get some more, so the production arranged for us to go and record all the vintage cars again, which for that film, you know, and just as an example, you know, my thinking behind the cars was that there was a different voice on the Western Plain. So you've had horses, and you've had spurs, and you've had, you know, leather, and you've had the wind and the grass and the crickets and the birds. And then all of a sudden, this engine is echoing on the horizon, and it's a change. It's a change in an era, and so it's such an important thing to highlight that with the right sound, and, you know, really record the correct thing for that moment. But yeah.
Yeah, and stuff like if you're reading the script, then you know there's going to be music. You can get that's a really good one to get on board with the sound recorders, and hey, make sure that they, you know, do an a cappella version, or do a version, several versions. If there's instruments, to have them played mute, or, you know,
and if there's
club scenes,
actors talking in between, maybe think about, while the actors are fresh after doing their lines, just if it's a low budget film, quickly shoot their lines talking to each other, because you never know, it might fly in because they're in that mode of that scene. I've used a bit of that sort of stuff before.
Well, that's great. I'm going to ask one very quick final question to sort of send us off here, and I'd love to hear, you know, what are your hopes and dreams for the future of the New Zealand film industry, but not just the industry itself, but the kinds of stories that we're telling?
Wow. Well, like you were talking about, the shape of cinema is changing a lot, because after this big COVID pandemic, that people are watching stuff at home a lot more, and you're looking at countries where people are watching a lot of content on their phones and that kind of stuff, and it's a challenging thing, because it lends itself to shrinking budgets then, and of course sound is at the short end of that stick. But I feel like people always want to be entertained, and people always, you know, people always love sound. You know, even if they don't know they love sound, they love sound.
Also, on another sort of a subject, I guess, in a way, is just training opportunities for, you know, men and women, like, you know, making sure that we have an equilibrium of training opportunities for everyone, parity across wages and that sort of thing, and good rates and wages. I know that they're working on rate cards and that sort of thing at the moment, which is really great for people to have a guide as to you know, what they can ask for pay. I would love to see New Zealand being able to, you know, we do get a lot of Americans coming and working here, but it's very, very, very hard for us to do anything there. And to get some sort of conversation happening with someone to try and get a bit more back and forth going on that side of things. But I desperately want to see more running around. I want to see Pauakai go down and grab one of those things and rip it out of the water.
I want to see more joyful stories as well.
Yeah, I want more joy. We need more joy in this world. I want to feel something ancient. I want to see more sci-fi, grassroots garage sci-fi. I want to see more garage horror.
And conversely, you know, saying that, you know, people are watching content on their small things a lot more. By the same token, people are able to work remotely a lot more. And I want to see more people being able to split their hours and spend more time with their families, and you know.
Yeah, fair hours for people working in film, because it does get insane, and you know, it's can be a relationship breaker working in the film industry. We're lucky that we are together, so we do this together, and so we know each other's hours and the madness that we go through. But that is not always the case, and I've seen some horrible, you know, breakups over the years from that sort of thing. But yeah, just I think for sound in particular, I just wish it wasn't treated as the end of the chain all the time. And I really wish that part of the budget, there was at one stage, there was a thing called the escalator, I think it was called.
Yeah.
And a lot of things changed after that. And, you know, I mean, it gave opportunities for people, but there were a lot of escalators, and by the time they finished shooting, there was no one to do, they were trying to get people to do sound, and there was no money. And they asked everyone to do it for free. And it sort of rolled from there.
Is this idea of, you know, the economy and everything's got to get cheaper, faster, better. And
yeah,
at the end of the day, you know,
to a degree, we have to come on board with that mentality,
yeah,
based on money and that sort of thing. But it's also, we're trying to create something special that's on the same screens as every other big movie, where we're not competing, we're just trying to show the world something beautiful and unique, and just allow that time to happen. And even if you're paying lesser wages or whatever, try and say, well, I can't pay as much, but we're going to try and do it over this time period. You know, like, I don't know, like, let it evolve.
Yeah, one of the things I love about your process is that it doesn't matter how big budget it is or small budget is, you devote the same amount of love and care to everybody's idea. You know,
Yeah,
no matter
so
how.
do you.
But that's, yeah, it's like,
yeah,
it's about honoring an art that's given to you, and
it's not an
giving
easy,
that back.
it's not an easy choice to be a director. Like,
No.
you throw yourself out there, you know, you are on the firing line, and you know, the turmoil and the self-doubt and all that sort of thing. So just, you know, you owe it to yourself to find yourself some buddies, also to keep things at bay as well. You know, sometimes you don't want to get too close sometimes if you got to cut something off, but like, you know, but that's the producer's job. The producer can do that sort of stuff. But, you know, find yourself your buddies and make some really cool, beautiful films, because they're all out there. They just don't know how to ask you.
Oh, that's a beautiful sentiment to end the discussion on, I think. Thank you for that. And on behalf of both guilds and everyone who's tuned in, as you'll see, lots of appreciation coming through here. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you, to hear about your artistry, your partnership, your collaboration, and most of all, your passion for film Aotearoa and the stories that we're telling. So thank you so much for your time and generosity.
You're welcome. Our baby will be very loud, I think. July, it's going to be a loud house.
Good luck.
You like sub.
Yeah, you like sub. Anyway, lovely to see all your faces, and good luck with everything.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Kia ora.
Thank you.